Hello, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again. So I would like to talk about record keeping today and what that looks like now in isolation and what it looked like before quarantine and before self-isolation. I know some of us probably have kept journals or diaries in the past, and I know I have, but what has started to take its place for me is, and I think a lot of us, is social media. And my Insta story in particular. Capture something on the subway on my way to work, or this happened on the street today, and make it a post really quick. We tend to edit ourselves too when we know that somebody else is going to view that. There tends to be more critique around how we're putting it out because we know there's an audience. So I am curious what happens when record keeping becomes intentional. And what can we learn about ourselves in isolation? I think what happens generally when we start recording our lives is self-reflection begins to enter, and maybe even self-enlightenment. There's a lot to be discovered about ourselves during this time. Now, record keeping can look like many different things. It doesn't have to look like writing or keeping a journal. Painting, drawing, photography is certainly record keeping. But what Anne had access to was her diary. So we're gonna focus on that. Dearest Kit, wishes, thoughts, accusations, and reproaches are swirling around in my head. I'm not really as conceited as many people think. I know my various faults and shortcomings better than anyone else, but there's one difference. I also know that I want to change, will change, and already have changed greatly. Sometimes I'm so deeply buried under self-reproaches that I long for a word of comfort to help dig myself out again. If only I had someone who took my feelings seriously. So we see first Anne beginning to identify faults in her own personality and characteristics, and she sees it as faults, at least, or that she thinks other people see as faults. At first, things might seem self-critical as one is journaling, recording their experience. The word record can be misleading in this context, actually, now that I think about it. Records we generally think of as unbiased, impartial. However, I think it's really hard when you think about the person who made the record, who's keeping the record, what the context of their situation is. Is any record ever truly unbiased and impartial? Well, and certainly at the beginning of recording herself and keeping this diary, she's very self-critical, has a lot of self-judgment, but that eventually begins to transform into something else. Dearest Kitty, I have a great deal of self-knowledge. In everything I do, I can watch myself as if I were a stranger. I can stand across from the everyday Anne and without being biased or making excuses, watch what she's doing, both the good and the bad. The self-awareness never leaves me. There's a really fascinating transformation that begins. She starts to say, I can watch myself. And I think that does happen through recording the fight that she got in with her mom, or something Peter had said to her in the attic that maybe rubbed her the wrong way, or that she really loved to hear. So at first, you're judging yourself in relationship to these things. And then eventually she starts to pull away and look at herself a little differently. And there's a lot of growth that happens in that for her too. But coming back to our own isolation, how can we, through record keeping, begin to look at our own growth and our own progress? Whatever that looks like, it will look different for so many people in this. And maybe some of us feel like we haven't made any progress at all. I certainly have days where I feel that way. And progress doesn't also mean productivity. I want to be clear about that. Progress and productivity can be totally separate things. How can we learn about ourselves in this isolation? Learning that I love to run to the window and bang on a pot and pan at 7 p.m. every night, that's something that I really enjoy that I don't think I ever would have thought of before this. Instead of biased and judgmental, we become more curious, right? And this curiosity and this inquiring mind begins to take over in self-reflection. We start to notice things about ourselves, our self-nature. We start to ask questions of ourselves. Questions are so good. Inquiry is so important in our lives. Asking questions of, why do I love to do this thing? Why didn't I like to do it before? Did I ever notice this before? When we record with intention, it leads to questions. And questions lead to more doors, that lead to more rooms, that lead to more places. So much can happen from just starting to write one sentence down. That can start to lead to so many things: this questioning, inquiry, curiosity, imagination. Is it because I haven't been outdoors for so long that I've become so smitten with nature? I remember a time when a magnificent blue sky, chirping birds, moonlight, and budding blossoms wouldn't have captivated me. The dark, rainy evening, the wind, the racing clouds had me spellbound. It was the first time in a year and a half that I'd seen the night face to face. I think that's wonderful, especially because here in New York City, a rainstorm just rolled through. I've often imagined how nice it would be if someone were able to confide everything to me. But now that it's reached that point, I realize how difficult it is to put yourself in someone else's shoes and find the right answer. We're all alive, but we don't know why or what for. We're all searching for happiness. We're all leading lives that are different and yet the same. We three have been raised in good families. We have the opportunity to get an education and make something of ourselves. We have many reasons to hope for great happiness. I think I'd like to end on that note. There are so many ways that we keep records in our lives. Even we can reflect on how we've kept records before. Think about how we can record with some intentionality, and what might that lead us to. Even if it just begins writing one sentence: I woke up this morning, period.